Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. My guest in the studio this evening, as usual, are Day Tucker, who is a rural affairs correspondent. Welcome back, Day. And on my right, and Chris sitting in his preferred stage left position, Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back, Chris. Shall we do the traditional elbow handshake?
Thank you very much. Right,
welcome all. Okay, so we're maintaining a healthy distance between us all this evening.
And now, all the hands were washed.
And everybody has washed their hands before they sat down tonight. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Everyone is talking about the coronavirus, and of course, there have been more tests today. Unfortunately, we're not able to confirm the total number of tests in Scotland, but we can tell you that 266 tests in Scotland today were positive. And the numbers of patients in Scotland who have died, sadly, from complications caused by the virus, COVID-19, has sadly risen to 6. As of 9 a.m. today, 64,621 people have been tested in the UK, of which 61,352 have confirmed negative and 3,269 were confirmed positive. As of 1 o'clock today, 144 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illnesses in the United Kingdom. Now this is an escalating count every day now, isn't it? I think everybody is just waiting for this to suddenly accelerate.
Yeah.
And it seems that our government at least, in locking down the schools and all the rest of it, the recent actions that have been taken, they're anticipating a steep rise.
Yeah. Well, it's hit me personally twice.
It has?
Yeah, in that I should have gone to the dentist to get a crown put back on, and she phoned me up to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Tucker, but you can't come in because we're not allowed to treat over 70s.
I've had also similar things happening.
It hurt me, hearing the over 70 bit hurt me more than having to...
Well, I know another family member of mine got a phone call to say that their physiotherapy appointment had to be postponed as well. And I know that from my point of view as a part-time driving instructor, when I'm hosting this show, that we've now lost, well, I've personally now lost 3 driving tests this week because of closures by the Driving Vehicle Standards Agency. Chris, have you been affected so far by the escalating shutdowns?
I've been largely unaffected, thankfully. I've had an ongoing issue. My elder brother's been in hospital, as you know, the past week and a half, so and he's been discharged tonight and he's been told to self-isolate for 7 days. So as an unpaid carer who only qualifies for 86 pence an hour, it's
does that mean you have to self-isolate with him?
No, because I live in a separate house, so basically I've been deemed by the NHS to be, the only... Well, I'm the only family member. My other brother lives in Australia, but out with these care support, which is ongoing. So basically, he's to stay in the house for 7 days.
It's affecting everyone. I think we can, everybody in the studio.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's unprecedented times. Along with the figures that you've quoted there. Sadly, it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets a whole lot
because we all have to maintain these high standards of hygiene, personal hygiene, and this social distancing to try and stay away from people as much as we can reasonably manage to do.
Well, I know that we opened the show with a wee bit of a joke, when we've done that, but it is quite serious, and trying to explain to someone, my elder brother's got psychosis and schizophrenia, and trying to explain to him how serious things are is actually something quite difficult. And unfortunately, unpaid carers don't get the training for it. We just learn on the job, if you know what I mean.
Well, also today we've been hearing that schools and nurseries are closing as well. The exams apparently will not go ahead. Teaching and learning support can continue with local flexibility. The Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, has updated Parliament on the decision to close schools and has confirmed that the exam diet, as they call it, will not go ahead this year. Scottish Qualifications Authority will put in place a certification model using coursework, teacher assessment and estimated grades and prior attainment. Local authorities are taking measures to protect vulnerable children who rely on schools for hot meals and for safe and supportive environment. And children of key workers have continuing access to learning or childcare. Mr. Swinney said today, my priorities are to ensure the health and well-being of our children, young people and staff, and to maintain teaching and learning wherever this is possible, guided by the advice of the Chief Medical Officer and the public health experts. Teaching, learning and support will continue, albeit in different ways, for different groups of children. For the majority, this will be through distance learning and online learning with different forms of ongoing contact with teachers rather than in-school face-to-face. Teachers and other staff who are well will be able to continue working. For vulnerable children and those who have parents or carers employed as key workers, local authorities are developing approaches to support them. We will not cut adrift vulnerable young people who often rely on school life for hot meals or for a safe, nurturing and supportive environment. Parents are not expected to be a teacher or to recreate the school day. Your school will be giving you some resources and suggestions as your first port of call. It's a measure of the gravity of the challenge that we now face that exams will not go ahead this year. With the support of the wider education system, a credible certification model can be put in place. In that command performance in the absence of the exam diet, to ensure young people in our schools and colleges who, through no fault of their own, are unable to sit exams are not disadvantaged. I also know that this is the first time, I think, in over 100 years, it might be the first time ever, that the Scottish Government has not held examinations in the education system. Since 1886, I think, was the figure I heard. So they've never had to do this.
1888, Gordon.
1888.
It stuck in my mind because that was the inception of Celtic football.
Was it really? Okay. So it's never happened before that schools have closed. Well, it has happened that schools have closed, but the exams have never been.
Yeah, John Swinney made the point that even throughout the two wars and stuff like that exams have always taken place. And I think that the measures that they've set out in order to continue online, you know, through the use of the, I can't remember what the school
the
online
name of that
service
program,
is called.
yes.
But in university it's called Moodle. And kids can access their curriculum through that.
That's right.
And the only issue here, obviously, what you mentioned, is that vulnerable children sometimes often only get that meal a day.
Yeah, I think the system
which is really important.
But they're easily identified by their individual schools, and it's possible, I think, that the schools may stay open with a skeleton staff, so those children might well be allowed to come back in.
Well, children have certainly for the last 10 years, had access to an online resource called Glow.
That's
Glow,
it.
that's
Glow.
Which I remember my own children using when they were at home, and now they can access it again. Right. And I have an 18-year-old who is just about to sit higher, not hires, advanced hires this year, and is not now going to be able to do so, but he's lucky because he already has an unconditional acceptance to university, and that means the pressure's off him, but his friends are really suffering. He said they're very upset.
But also, they're almost there. I mean, they're only a month or so away.
This is the sad thing, isn't it? It's just...
Well, yes and no, but all the work that they've done can be assessed.
This is true.
Yeah, but the one thing that we have to take out of this is that going forward, employers don't look back at a child's achievement, or a young person's achievement, and say, "Oh, you graduated that year. There was no testing."
The trouble is, Chris, that if young people have had trouble during their prelims and have been desperately working flat out to bring their marks up, then only their teacher would know this. From looking at the coursework. So it has to involve them.
Yeah, of course it has to involve them. And I think Larry Flanagan from the EIS union pointed this out, that there's, it's a bit like the Football Premier League. There's always going to be winners and losers. Yeah. There's a big discussion on,
there will be appeals.
Celtic just get the cup just now because of what they've amassed, and should Hearts go down? And there are no winners and losers in this, and there shouldn't be any winners and losers. And that's why I'm, again, saying the point that I hope in the future that employers don't look back at when they graduated and say, oh, that was the year that everything was suspended.
Chris, speaking of winners and losers, just reminded me a little bit with the next item, which is that for once in the history of both Westminster and Holyrood, people are actually in agreement about what to do about something. And the new measures contained in the UK coronavirus bill will help enhance Scotland's responses to COVID-19 and strengthen frontline services. The Constitutional Secretary, Mike Russell, said that the bill introduced into the UK Parliament today followed close cooperation with the devolved administrations and was required.
A new one, isn't it?
This is the unusual thing. With cooperation of the devolved administrations and was required because of the extraordinary public health and economic challenges posed by the pandemic. It covers both reserved and devolved matters and will enable the Scottish Government to bring more health professionals and social workers into the workforce, to relax regulations, to ease the burden on frontline staff, and to take steps to help to slow the spread of the virus. It grants new powers to cancel events and to allow the police to compel potentially infectious people to undergo COVID-19 screening and assessment. In a statement to the Scottish Parliament, Mr. Russell said, "We are, as a country and across the globe, facing an unprecedented set of challenges. Every life will change. The bill is the result of a great deal of intensive work between the UK government and the devolved administrations and is required because of the extraordinary public health and economic challenges posed by the pandemic. The Scottish Government will recommend granting legislative consent. I should emphasise that these measures are temporary and will only be used if required. I make a commitment that we will institute, after discussion across the Scottish Parliament, appropriate reporting on how and when the powers in the bill have been used by the Scottish Government. We must put in place what we need to do we must put in place what we need to do the right thing for everyone and to take action to protect, to enhance and strengthen not just our response but ourselves. Together we can and we will win through." So this is a very strong, positive message of unity, it seems, for a change, from Michael Russell, who is normally in direct opposition with the British government on so many things.
Well, only because the British government are now including the devolved parliaments and actually doing what they should have done. And he wouldn't have had to be in opposition to them if they'd done that right at the start of Brexit.
Do you believe that the British government dragged its heels on involving Wales, Northern Ireland and Scottish administrations in the planning for this?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about
generally?
that. I'm thinking back to the Brexit discussions.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with what Dave's saying, and I think latterly, at the start of this virus, I think that the cooperation wasn't a two-way street. No. And suddenly, Boris Johnson had an epiphany on the way to, Damascus. And
when you couldn't spell either of those two words.
when you watch the House of Commons and you watch Holyrood, and you can see that there is no political point scoring going on here, then you can actually see that there is a conciliatory air in both houses.
Yeah, I think Nicola was quoted recently, a few days ago, as saying that for once in her life she was not the slightest bit interested in party politics. Yeah. That's quite a remarkable thing for any political leader to come out and say. But then it also goes to the scale of this. Yes. This is not just a British or even a European pandemic. This is a global. And it is sweeping across the planet like an enormous shockwave. It's almost as if some massive meteorite had hit the Earth and the shockwave was just spread out from China in all directions. Anyway, just wanted to move on a little bit further. Chris, you and I were talking about this next subject before we came on, and that is that the British military is on standby as the coronavirus shuts down swathes of London. The 20,000 military personnel are already on standby. Dozens of underground train stations across London are closed, and the Queen has left for the safety of Windsor Castle. And I seem to remember she didn't even leave for Windsor Castle during the Blitz, did she?
No.
Well, I
I
don't
think
know.
this
I
is
wasn't-
unprecedented
I wasn't
as
here
well.
at the time.
Anyway, somebody probably correct me later. I'm pretty sure she didn't
No,
even
she
leave
didn't.
Buckingham Palace
No.
during the
Uh-huh.
war.
Yeah.
But anyway, she has left for the apparent safety of Windsor Castle
Well, she is over 70.
as the coronavirus shuts down whole swathes of the economy. As the coronavirus outbreak sweeps across the world, governments, companies and investors are grappling with the biggest public health crisis since the 1918 influenza pandemic. That panicked populations and imploded financial markets. Against a background of panic buying in supermarkets and the biggest fall in sterling for decades, the British government moved to quash rumours that travel in and out of London would be restricted. There is zero prospect of any restriction being placed on travelling in and out of London, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson's spokesman told reporters. He said that police were responsible for maintaining law and order, and there were no plans to use the military for this purpose, although the government put military reservists on formal notification. But dozens of underground train stations across London were due to be closed, and an industry source said supermarkets were expecting police support amid fears that London was facing a virtual shutdown. London's Transport Authority said it would lose close to 40 underground train stations until further notice and reduce other services, including buses and trains. The line between Waterloo Station and the City of London Financial District would be closed. People would not be travelling by any means unless they really, really have to, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said. Shoppers were queuing around the block early on Thursday morning to buy basic supplies such as bottled water and tinned goods ahead of an expected toughening of measures to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Supermarkets have been forced to limit purchases after frantic shoppers stripped shelves. Outside one Sainsbury's supermarket in central London on Thursday, a huge queue had formed ahead of opening, with people standing calmly in the rain. It seems that the wheels have come off society. It's suddenly dog eat dog out there. Or
You were talking about how Boris Johnson and the devolved parliaments are now talking together.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget, he has put Sadiq Khan out on a limb and left him out of all these talks.
He has
and yet
excluded
Sadiq Khan is
the mayor.
the whole of London.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunately the tribalism in London is still going on. I think between Khan and Johnson, of course, both of them mayors. Boris Johnson being an ex-mayor of London, I think there's no love lost
Yes,
between
but
them.
No.
why would Boris Johnson exclude Sadiq Khan out of the talks?
Well, you
Other than pettiness.
well,
Probably was.
pettiness. You just took the words right out of my mouth there.
But of course, in this situation, there is absolutely no room for pettiness.
No.
No,
And
no, there's not.
with talks of troops being deployed now
Yeah.
to strategic points around the UK, and people are actually beginning to notice that troops are moving around the UK. And there have been a lot of fears that the army was going to be camped in George Square, and a lot
Yeah,
of rumours
well,
flying around social media. I know we've all heard them.
I
today.
I have to put a personal apology out to Richard Lyle, because he asked the First Minister a question at FMQs today directly pertaining to troops reportedly being in Strathclyde Park and Bellahouston Park, and there's a lot of crap going on
A lot of hoaxing.
around in social media, and
Yeah.
I've got to hold my hands up and say that I was taken in by one of them. I was private messaged by one of my followers to say that this is definitely 100% genuine. And so, I wholeheartedly apologise to Richard Lyle if he's formed that question on, something that he's read on Twitter. And it goes back to what we were discussing earlier on Monday night when Stuart MacDonald was saying about the whole fake news and stuff like that on social media. So, but yeah, there will be an element of military intervention. There's no doubt about that.
The plan originally called for reservists and regulars to be positioned in strategic places in order that they could requisition hotels if they were needed to create temporary hospital accommodation. And those had already been identified in the troops necessary to do this kind of work, if you like, because it involved things like driving oxygen tankers around,
Yes.
bringing medical supplies and food and so forth. And so it is very much a support role.
As a Liverpool fan, I have to take my hat off to Gary Neville, who's an ex-Man U player. He's now running a chain of hotels around that area, and he's closed all the hotels and gave them to the government for medical use.
It's made them available as
fair play
makeshift
to
hospitals.
the man. Fair play to the man.
So there are people out there who
We're doing good.
Yeah, who are doing good. Now, moving on from this to our next story. Now, the SNP has renewed calls on the UK government to urgently introduce wide-ranging multi-billion-pound financial packages for people, as the Resolution Foundation published its proposals to immediately step up the economic response to the coronavirus crisis. Neil Gray MP backed proposals to extend statutory sick pay to those currently ineligible and to meet the cost of making it more generous. The SNP Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary also backed the call for a new statutory retention pay scheme which will keep people in employment, and for an increase in universal credit and other social security benefits to protect people's incomes. Last night, the SNP's Westminster leader Ian Blackford MP wrote to Boris Johnson calling for a cross-party meeting this week after the Prime Minister agreed to meet to discuss SNP calls for a financial package for people, including emergency universal basic income and increasing rates of statutory sick pay to at least the EU average. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Neil Gray said, "With thousands of people already being made redundant and millions facing a threat to their jobs and incomes, it's vital that the UK government urgently introduces a multi-billion-pound wide-ranging financial package for people. We must learn the lessons of the last financial crisis. Families have already been hit by a decade of austerity with soaring rates of poverty and inequality. We cannot allow more people to be left struggling to get by as the coronavirus hits our economy. The UK government must do whatever it takes to put money in people's pockets, protecting jobs and incomes and ensuring that people aren't left struggling to support their families, to pay their bills and to keep a roof over their heads. The proposals by the Resolution Foundation must be taken seriously, as must cross-party calls to use the tax system to ensure everyone has access to an emergency basic income and statutory sick pay levels that at least meet the EU average and are extended to all workers, including self-employed and lower earners. I urge the UK government to meet with opposition parties and urgently deliver this support as part of a wide-ranging multi-billion-pound financial package to protect the incomes of all people." Now, this is just in. Okay, this has just come in. I've just been handed this. Now, this is from Collinbridge Aviemore Hotel. It is a letter which appears to have been sent. I'm guessing it's an open letter. It says services no longer required. Taking the latest government advice, this letter is to confirm with effect from 19th of March 2020. Okay, it is apparently a redundancy notice, it seems. Okay, we have a tweet that came in with this from somebody who got this letter from Aviemore Collinbridge Hotel. Not just fired, but chucked out of their accommodation with no notice and no redundancy pay. Britannia Hotels should be ashamed of themselves. Certainly no room at the inn here. Disgusting. And the letter says, taking the latest government advice, this letter is to confirm that with effect from 19th of March 2020, your employment's been terminated as your services are no longer required. Your final pay slip, including all hours worked up to and including your final day, together with any accrued holidays already not taken, is included in lieu of notice. Please understand that if you've taken more holidays this year than you had currently built up allowance for, this amount will be deducted from your final salary. Oh my goodness me.
That's absolutely wild. And I've just actually...
And they're asked to vacate the hotel accommodations immediately.
Again, that's absolutely criminal. But I've got to make a point. Story. My cousin who works for Tesco, I've mentioned her a few times in the show, She was advised to go home a couple of days ago by the Tesco personnel, and because she's a high risk, she's got COPD.
Right.
So she was like, thanks very much, appreciate that, and all the rest of it. Really thought that they were being very, very genuine. Yeah. She then got an email the next day. She was under the impression, and she was told that it would be full pay for 2 weeks. She then got an email the following day saying that this was coming out of her holiday entitlement.
Yes,
so naturally she's contacted me and asked my advice as a trade union rep, and I've set out what I think her response should be, and hopefully I'll be able to speak to, informally I'll be able to speak to her Usdaw rep at the store to make sure that that isn't the case.
Well, this next story is linked directly to what we just read out and to what you've just described. Gavin Newlands, MP, urges the UK government to take urgent action to protect workers facing hardship. Now, hardship obviously takes many forms. MP Gavin Newlands, the SNP MP for Paisley in Renfrewshire North, has pressed the UK government to take urgent action alongside businesses to help workers and the self-employed following testimonies of workers who have been unable to access desperately needed support. Now, I gather that would be especially true if you are turfed out on your ear by your employer.
Of course,
Now, the call for action follows reports that Deliveroo drivers who are registered as self-employed are having to resort to coming back to work instead of being in self-isolation because they've been unable to receive the required absence documentation from the NHS. The UK government has pledged earlier this month that it would bring forward a system to help workers obtain the documents so that they can in turn access support. However, many workers have faced difficulties and barriers in accessing the service and absence forms. Commenting, Gavin Newlands, MP, said the reports that people are being forced to work rather than self-isolate because they have been unable to obtain absence documentation is deeply concerning. This is not just the case with Deliveroo drivers, but it may also affect millions of employees around the UK who are having to work in order to pay their bills or rent and to support their families. We're now in an unprecedented and difficult situation. However, the UK government must take urgent action to fix the system so that workers, the self-employed and those in precarious work are able to obtain the relevant documentation from the authorities to receive financial support and self-isolate. So it seems, this looks as if on the face of it that the bureaucratic hurdles that people are having to leap over just to get the documentation from the government bureaucracy that says they are to self-isolate is stopping them getting things like statutory sick pay, and they're being forced to go to work.
How much simpler just to give them a universal basic income?
I think it sounds like the only way to deal with this, because these people, if they were sick, are going to reinfect all their workmates and clients and customers along the way.
I think it's time when people who are self-isolating, I would urge them to watch the recent Ken Loach film, Sorry I Missed You. And it sets out the trauma that one guy has to go through in order to become one of these just-in-time workers, who, you know, has to lay out the expense of getting a van and make all these deliveries, and you know, and then when things go wrong, that's when all the penalties start to kick in,
and there's nothing to
see, no support, and you know, and it affects families, it affects marriages, and obviously your house.
Now, as well as companies kicking people out into the cold and the government not working fast enough to protect them and to give them some kind of income, we're also now hearing a story here from Glasgow Kelvin MSP Sandra White, who is calling on private parking firms to ditch charges at hospitals over the coming months to ensure hero NHS staff can continue tackling the coronavirus pandemic. Well, the SNP scrapped parking charges at all NHS-run hospital car parks. Charges remain in place at so-called PFI hospitals, such as Glasgow Royal Infirmary, Edinburgh Royal Infirmary and Ninewells Hospital in Dundee. Many NHS staff are working longer hours to help tackle the virus on the front line, despite transport links to hospitals being reduced. Ms White has now written to parking bosses urging them to show solidarity with the health service staff and scrap the charges, so that that can cost up to £20 a day for the duration of the pandemic. Commenting, Sandra White said, "In times of crisis, we all need to step up and do what we can to help.
Absolutely.
Our NHS staff in particular are under incredible strain, tackling this infection on the front line every day. But while our NHS heroes are working longer hours to deal with the pandemic, public transport to and from hospitals is being reduced. It's now time for these private car parking companies to play their part in the fight against coronavirus too, and scrap the charges at hospitals in Scotland so that NHS staff can get to work and focus on the task at hand. As a nation, this is the greatest test we have faced in a lifetime. During these uncertain times, we must show solidarity and work together for the greater good. And I'm sure these parking firms will do the right thing." Well, if you're like me and you've had experience of falling foul of parking firms, you might question that last
Yeah.
that last little piece of optimism there.
Must applaud Sandra's optimism, but you know, it's worth noting. I was just about to say, you know, the majority of these suspect parking firms are English.
Yes.
And
UK firms.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But you know, I mean, some of them actually, when they levy these charges, they're not actually legal in
That's
Scotland.
They can't enforce them here.
They can't enforce
Yes,
them.
yes.
I had it when I was attending a funeral actually, and I get invited back to the wake and parked in the hotel, only to find out that I should have obtained a ticket and I got a fine.
Right.
You know, thankfully, once I wrote to them, they did overturn it, but that's neither here nor there. We have to point out, and again, I don't want to get partly political, but, you know, this is down to the
Yes.
thanks of the Labour Party that brought in the
Absolutely.
PFI schemes anyway.
Yes.
You know,
It's
and
left a
we're-
toxic legacy, hasn't
we're
it?
trying to, again, Nicola did say today that, you know, even if the parking firms don't move on this, the Scottish Government will try and mitigate it where possible.
I was
Again,
always-
mitigate it.
I was always puzzled about parking charges because I always understood that the car parks around hospitals belonged to the NHS. The land actually belonged to
Yeah.
the state. If that's the case, how can a company from, say, London charge you for parking on a piece of state
Because they've
property?
put in the infrastructure, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe, but they could be bought out.
One would have thought, yes.
You could be
Well,
bought out. There's
one
only
would
3
have.
of them left, you know?
But you know, it's obviously it's down to legal contracts and whatnot and what have you. But you know, we can't get away from the fact that you know.
Well, I'm just hearing, sorry Chris to interrupt you, I'm just hearing the reason why they can't just buy the land back
Right.
is the land belongs to the developers because as part of the PFI
right.
programme they own the bit of ground.
Yeah, well,
Or they have the right to lease it or whatever.
but I mean, this is the whole crux of the PFI
Yeah.
fiasco.
All tied into that
You
contract.
know, everybody's all tied in, and everybody gets a bung off of the PFI
And so
transaction.
it goes on, yeah.
And you know, again, it's one of the failures of the Labour Party in Scotland. That it's
Possibly
put a
potential
blight
for
on
a
the
community
NHS.
buyout, though, isn't there, under land reform?
You would hope so. The question is whether
Whether there's the will to do
The,
that.
the interesting thing about this, though, is that if the PFI contract was signed in Scotland, in Scots law, then it can, I think, be done that way.
Right.
If it was in some other legal format, I don't know, but I don't think anybody's ever challenged it.
No.
But if it's in the public interest,
Yes, which it is.
I
Of
don't.
course it is. Yeah.
I would. You know, even with contracts, you can sometimes buy your way out of a
Yes.
contract.
Yes.
But whether the government would ever countenance that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to move the story on a little bit further now. So we're also now moving into the aviation industry, Chris. I know this is largely your area of expertise. Now, the SNP's Shadow Transport spokesman has called on the UK government to outline a package of measures to support workers in the aviation and transport sector as the industry struggles to cope under the impact of the pandemic. Gavin Newlands MP criticised the Transport Secretary for failing to bring forward plans earlier to remove the instability facing employees and the wider industry. The MP for Paisley and Renfrewshire North, a constituency which has a significant number of jobs in the sector, being close to the airport,
3,000.
has warned that the situation is serious and time critical. Commenting, Gavin Newlands MP said, "I'm extremely concerned that the UK government has so far failed to bring forward targeted measures to support workers in the aviation and public transport sector, many of whom are concerned over the impact of coronavirus crisis and how it will affect their jobs and ability to provide for their families." It's been clear this week from speaking to management and workers at airlines, airports, bus operators, baggage handling and catering companies that time is absolutely critical. Our transport system is under pressure. The aviation sector is on the brink. Flybe had serious underlying issues, but coronavirus outbreak tipped them over the edge, while last week Gatwick was forced to announce staff job cuts. The situation is serious and time is critical. Many of these workers have already made significant financial sacrifices by taking unpaid leave or reducing working hours, but this is not sustainable. From aviation to public transport, employees and management are calling out for help in their time of need. It's time for the UK government to act before it's too late. It is an absolute firestorm out there of fires to fight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolute riot for aviation in the UK and globally. You know, I mean, there's so many airlines are obviously restricted as to where they can fly, and you know, the people don't. When people get on an aircraft, they just think that it's the aircraft that they're getting on. They forget about the people who service the aircraft.
Yes.
You know, from the fuelers to the baggage handlers to the ramp agents, the air traffic control,
Mechanics.
the mechanics as well, and you know, people in the run up to that, check-in staff, boarding staff, and all the rest of it. There's a multitude of
I mean,
jobs.
an aeroplane's basically like a flying small hotel, isn't
Well,
it?
yes, aye,
It's got
aye,
toilets,
aye,
it's got
it's a
kitchens,
conveyance.
it's got air conditioning,
Yeah,
it's got all these
yeah,
things that
yeah.
need to be serviced.
Yeah, and again, the cabin crew, whilst the aircraft is in there, they have a tremendous amount of responsibility to do in order to keep people safe, and they are very. I would just point this out to Priti Patel if she's listening. They're very, very highly skilled because they go under a severe regime of training before they're allowed in an aircraft, and that's down to health and safety. It's down to medical resuscitation. It's down to obviously the health and safety that I mentioned, but you know,
there's
fire prevention and you know, all the rest of it. There's a plethora of skills that they have, as well as obviously the interpersonal skills that you need to be a cabin.
Yeah, it's not like getting on a bus where you're just paying
No.
fare and one person
No,
drives
it's
it.
not, because you know, I mean, some of these flights are you know, like 10, 12, maybe even 14, 16 hours long. And it is a tremendous strain, you know, and you know, a highly pressured job at times. If you can imagine, you know, 200 odd football jobs all you know, tanked up and
Heading
on their
off to
way
the European Cup
somewhere
final or
and stuff
something,
like
yeah.
that. You know, so it has to be said that you know, working in the aviation industry is a skilled job. And you know, and as I said, it's 3,000 jobs we're talking about at Glasgow Airport. When
Is
you
that
include
just the jobs on ground?
well,
side,
no,
or is
but
that
I'm talking
including-
about in the round, and that includes the ancillary staff and all the rest of it. So you know, and they've been hit obviously by Flybe. And the downturn, obviously the collapse of Thomas Cook as well.
It's not just going to be the airline staff either, because there's all the shops, there are all the food
shops,
outlets,
stuff like that, food outlets as
there's
well.
the security
bars,
guards,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, Glasgow's got its own security guards who do the checks as you go through. There's also the border force as well, which man the passport control. And you know, I mean, right down to car park attendants and stuff like that. You know, and even the cleaners. You know, so there is a plethora of skills out there. But, you know, I have to make the point about, and I'm really disappointed about EasyJet. EasyJet are actually, they are making staff redundant, or they are asking staff to take unpaid leave for up to 3 months, whilst at the same time advertising their winter programme. They are actively taking bookings from September onwards, and they're saying, oh, if you can't make these bookings that you make, we'll be flexible in moving dates. Not everybody's that flexible. So EasyJet are trying to actually cash in on people's optimism that this is going to be finished by then. You know, and I understand the marketing strategy behind it, but it's giving people false hope outside of the aviation industry
it's not an honest thing to be doing.
It's not really the most honest thing to do in my eyes. I wholly understand why they're doing it, because they need money in order to sustain themselves. I get that. But by the same token, asking staff to take a 3-month sabbatical, you know, without any financial recompense, you know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about my cousin. You know, and again, we see it with the Deliveroo drivers and all the rest of it. Anybody who is in the just-in-time economy, you know, are really onto a sticky wicket. And I have to point out, it's the fact that the Tories absolutely decimated the trade union bill.
Well, trade union powers were basically just
ripped up.
Totally. What teeth were left were blunted, so they couldn't be used.
Exactly.
There's one sort of spin out from all this, which I think we miss, which is that amid all of these calls for more funds to be made available to everyday people, the cost of it was estimated today, and this is from another source which we don't have in the studio today, so I'm going to give you a rough idea of it. But the Bank of England is now planning to buy somewhere in the region of 1/3 of the UK's debt off it, to allow the British government to borrow the equivalent of 1/3 of the national debt, so that they have enough money to give to everybody to survive this.
When you say the UK's debt,
the UK's national debt of whatever it was.
Our
collective
debt.
personal debt, or the government debt?
Yeah, and the interest rates today have been cut.
You said but you haven't answered the
Sorry,
question.
I was hearing something in my ear there. Sorry, I misheard you. What were you asking me?
I'd like to know, is this debt all our personal collective debt, public debt, or is it the UK government's debt?
It's the UK's government's debt from its spending or its excessive borrowing over the last few decades. But the thing is that, technically speaking, the UK government is responsible for it, not necessarily us, because they borrow money on our behalf. But the new Bank of England governor, who has just taken over from Mark Carney, has said he wants to act now and literally buy the debt from the United Kingdom to relieve the debt burden on the UK government, so that it can borrow more money.
Again.
They're also planning to print more money, print their way out of
which any government can do.
Fiat money.
There is a magic money tree,
yes,
like what we've been told.
Well, the Bank of England is a currency issuer.
Yeah, but also they could save an awful lot of money if they scrap HS2 right away. If they stop renewing if they stop on the renewal programme for Trident, if they stop all these vanity projects of you know, throwing money,
but it doesn't
matter, down the bloody Swanee over the failing grailing.
Yeah, but you're looking at this as though the British government actually has a pot of money that it spends every year. It doesn't. The Bank of England creates money for it to spend.
Yeah, exactly.
The banks
that is the main point.
Well, they're actually owing us, the public, the money that was lent to them to get out of the problem. On top of that, they have got all the PPI money that wasn't claimed, and it apparently goes into billions. So they're sitting on that money that rightfully should come back to society, but they're holding it up and they're saying, we'll lend you.
Well, we're going to move on now because I know what you're saying, Day, and I appreciate what you're saying, okay? But we're going to move the subject of the conversation back to China now, the original epicenter of the virus, where it broke out originally. And Wuhan City have reported for the first time no new domestic transmissions for the first time, raising hopes that the strict containment efforts to stop the virus are actually working. Now, this is relating to domestic transmissions. That means transmissions between Chinese people inside the Chinese city of Wuhan. Wuhan lockdown since January the 23rd is currently the only city in Hubei province still designated high risk and subject to strict travel bans, even as restrictions across the rest of the country have loosened in recent weeks. The city relaxed quarantine rules slightly on Thursday, allowing people to walk in their compounds rather than staying confined to living quarters, the state-run CCTV reported. If no new cases reported for 14 consecutive days, the lockdown could gradually be lifted, the China Daily newspaper has said, citing an epidemiologist. We expect new cases will cease to appear in mid or late March. Li Lanhuan, the director of the China State Key Laboratory for Diagnosis and Treatment of Infectious Diseases, told the newspaper. The number of daily new infections in mainland China fell below 100 for the first time on March the 6th. On Thursday, there were 34 cases, up from 13 a day earlier. All of Thursday's cases involved travellers from abroad. The total infections in mainland China stood at 80,928, with the death toll at 3,245 by Wednesday, up 8 from the day before. Wuhan accounted for 6 of the 8 new deaths in Hubei. No new infections have been reported for 14 days in the rest of Hubei, where the authorities said that on Thursday they would allow entry on certain conditions to people from other provinces. China's recent efforts to fight the epidemic have increasingly focused on inbound travellers amid concern about a second wave of infections from overseas. New imported coronavirus infections hit a record of 21 in Beijing. Data showed on Thursday, piling pressure on the authorities to screen out infected passengers and to isolate suspected cases. A single spark can start a prairie fire, the state-backed China Daily wrote in an editorial. On Wednesday, Beijing recorded 21 new infections from abroad, mostly in travellers from Britain and Spain. Since last week, Beijing Airport has set aside a special zone for international flights, with health checks required for all disembarking passengers. Non-transit travellers are sent to designated sites for a compulsory 14-day quarantine. Beijing has halted self-quarantine for overseas arrivals, which had previously been allowed according to the state media. China's aviation regulator said on Thursday it would divert some international flights bound for Beijing to other cities. The Global Times said China's aviation authority had appointed a team of 12 airport firms to help. Such reports suggest the capital may have reached its limit in screening incoming visitors, a China Daily editorial said. The southern province of Guangdong reported 9 new imported cases, while the financial hub in Shanghai saw 2 new infections from overseas. Shanghai today expanded the list of countries from which travellers have to undergo a 14-day quarantine to 24 countries, 8 more than previously. From today, those entering Guangdong after visiting countries with high infection rates will be quarantined for 14 days, either at home or at a centralised medical centre, the official Zhanghua news agency has said. The far western region of Xinjiang adopted similar measures, Xinhua said. China's eastern provinces of Shandong and Anhui and its southernmost city of Chongqing and Wuhan earlier said that they would require all overseas arrivals to spend 14 days in quarantine. China tentatively plans to hold its annual gathering of Parliament in late April or early May, according to reports. So,
I've got to congratulate you.
What a series of very difficult names to pronounce there. However, the picture in China does seems at least tentatively to be gradually improving. And if Wuhan is actually now, for the first time, got no new cases.
They started in December, did they?
November, I think it was November.
November, so
Yeah,
November, December,
I think
January,
we're about
February,
3 or 4
March.
months behind
It
their
wasn't,
curve.
I don't think they formally recognised it as an outbreak of a new disease until the new year started. So
I
it would
think
be
roughly
January
about that.
sometime.
Right.
The lockdown, I think, started January. We'll get the exact date at some point. I seem to remember it was late January, but
Right.
it could be wrong.
But I'm really curious as to who's actually flying into
January the
these-
20th, we're
these,
told.
since January
That was close.
20th.
Right.
You know, but you know, I'd be interested to see what countries are actually flying
Flying
into.
in.
But I think it was interesting that,
Beijing
that
and stuff.
Britain was actually one of the countries that China was banning flights from.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we have such a bad infection rate. They don't want us
There's
to
a
come
lot
over.
of English teaching goes on, though,
That's
in
right.
China.
Yeah,
Yes.
there is. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true. Also in Japan,
Uh-huh.
there
Yes.
are a large number of British citizens who teach in both countries.
Well, my elder brother, he has his own PR house in Melbourne, and he does quite a lot of work in Asia, and he's constantly, he was constantly travelling to Dubai, Vietnam, and Beijing as well, and last week I had a conversation with him, and he said that he had a contract, but he just didn't want to undertake it because of the travel and the quarantine
yeah.
that was added on to it and all the rest of it. He said that you know, really wasn't worth the trouble. You know, so.
Well,
But then in stark contrast, actually, the self-employed, which he is in Australia, are all actually getting a wage from the government.
they are.
Yeah.
How are they working that one out, Christine? The details.
I don't know the details. He did tell me that the unemployed are getting $200. I don't know if that's weekly or
That'll be
monthly.
weekly,
He
probably.
didn't-
Yeah.
He didn't qualify that. And $200, to be honest with you, is a drop in the ocean in Australia.
Yes, yeah, but
you-
it's a gesture.
You know, but it is a gesture. You know, I mean, a loaf of bread costs about £3.50 over there. You know, in our equivalent money. But yeah, the government have come up, and they are actually a liberal government.
Yes.
You know, a centre-right government.
Yeah.
And they've taken this.
Well, that was what surprised me when you said that.
Yeah. They've taken this incentive to put money back into the
economy.
the economy
realise that
and
they
the
have-
individual
they-
communities,
Yes.
They have
and
to
get
keep
it
money
circulating around again. You know, which I think, you know, Boris, if you're listening, I did hear tell that even Trump was thinking about a possible, you know, like universal
Income.
payment and stuff like that.
Well,
to,
on a temporary basis, I think
Americans
are
on
actually.
a temporary basis.
Yeah, Ian Blackford is pushing for a meeting tomorrow, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
Good.
It certainly has to be urgently done. Anyway, I remember.
Ask Ian to stoke the fire up so that you know,
Yeah.
when he's holding Boris's 2 plates of meat at it,
Well,
that it's nice and toasted.
Ian seems to be fulfilling his brief as the leader of the opposition at the moment.
Oh, he certainly is, yeah. He certainly
Anyway,
is.
our final story, well, one of our final stories this evening, is a completely different story. And it's nothing to do with the coronavirus. Just for once, it's nothing to do with the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And this is a new piece of legislation which is being brought about by the Scottish Government. Now, women and girls at risk from the illegal and harmful practice of female genital mutilation, or FGM, will be better protected under new legislation. A bill passed today will allow courts to issue protection orders specifically designed to safeguard those who find themselves under pressure to undergo FGM. Now, under the new legislation, anyone will be able to apply for a protection order if they have concerns that someone is at risk, including the person themselves. A local authority, Police Scotland, the Lord Advocate, or any other party with permission of the court. The Female Genital Mutilation Protection and Guidance Scotland Bill, it's a nice short term for it, will see statutory guidance issued for professionals and agencies working in this area. This will provide victims of FGM and those at risk of the practice with a more consistent and holistic response from public services. Welcoming the unanimous backing for the bill, the Equalities Minister, Christina McKelvey, said Female genital mutilation is a deeply abhorrent practice and a fundamental violation of the human rights of women and girls. It is a physical manifestation of a deep-rooted gender inequality. Introducing protection orders will safeguard women and children at risk. We will continue to work with our partners across the public and the third sectors and affected communities to effectively tackle and eventually eradicate this unacceptable practice from society. Anne Spears, the Acting Chief Executive Officer at Edinburgh charity Multicultural Family Base, said, "Through our Bright Choices service, we offer free and confidential service to women and children who are survivors of FGM. The new protection orders, when combined with guidance, awareness and tangible frontline support, will be a vital tool to help us tackle and eradicate this unacceptable and inhumane practice from our society." Now, this is a subject which occasionally comes up in the news, but this is the first time I've heard of legislation prohibiting, well, not know if it's prohibiting it, but it's certainly encouraging it to be reported and for people who are at risk to come forward. I have to admit, I have no experience of this, but I understand that this particular practice came with some cultural baggage from some
That's
parts
right.
of Africa.
Yes.
And has carried over into the culture here to some
Yes.
extent.
But I don't know a huge amount about it, but is it not children that they
It is.
do this to?
Young girls.
So,
It's younger
you know,
children.
if-
I think it's also, as well as cultural, I think it's also religious purposes as
Oh,
well.
right.
There's a purity thing
some-
about it.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know what religion that they attribute it to, but it's a horrific practice.
yeah.
That it's obviously painful and distressing for a child to go through.
but also many young girls' lives are put at risk through infections and
Yeah.
as you say, the pain
And
of
the-
it must be
And their quality of life thereafter.
Yeah, but,
indeed, and the psychological trauma as well from
yeah,
this.
but hopefully this will go a long way to stop the practice. In Scotland, there have been reports in the past of this happening in the back street, shall
Yeah.
we say?
Or onto a plane and away back to another
Well, this is
country to
this is
get
the
it
other
done.
thing, is anyone at risk of being
Yeah.
kidnapped and taken
Right.
abroad for
Yeah.
this is also
You know,
part of this.
and whilst Scotland is a welcoming society of
Yes.
multicultures, there are some practices within different cultures that are clearly quite distasteful to
Yes.
the people living
Well-
in the Western world.
Our final story this evening is actually from a completely different source from normal. This is from Patrick Harvie, actually the leader, or I should say the co-leader of the Scottish Green Party. Now, the Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie MSP has called on everyone to demonstrate the values of compassion, solidarity and mutual care at this most challenging time. Speaking at First Minister's Questions this afternoon, Mr Harvie referenced the unprecedented challenge faced by every level of government and for Parliament. The Glasgow MSP also expressed his thanks and concern to those dedicated workers dealing with this crisis. He said the current crisis is of an unprecedented challenge for every level of government. It's a challenge for all of us to work together as never before. It's also a challenge for our whole society to show the values of compassion, solidarity and mutual care are what matters at a time like this. I want to join with others in expressing our thanks and our concern for the dedicated people working in the NHS and other public services, and also for those people who have been long undervalued. Every carer, cleaner, supermarket worker and many more. Their work is essential to keep us, to help us get through all of this, and they need our support. Like other members, I've heard from many people who just want to help, whether it's keeping in touch with family, looking after a neighbour, or making sure people in isolation have what they need. Mr Harvie also highlighted the serious concerns facing many tenants, both in private and social sector. One group in society most urgently in need of help is those who are losing their incomes but also facing continued rent demands. We've heard from one constituent who has already seen her full-time income disappear completely. Her boss wants to be kind, but but an events company with no events to run simply cannot pay her. She has no idea how she will pay her rent or other bills. I've heard from landlords who are being responsible and recognising people's needs, but also from people being forced out of their homes, using a range of existing grounds for eviction. The Scottish Government's announcement yesterday will still leave people facing a choice between the threat of losing their home at this dangerous time or building up unpayable debts over the coming months, while in many cases their landlords are benefiting from a mortgage holiday. Isn't it clear that we need a complete ban on evictions during this crisis on any grounds and a rent holiday for those who can afford it?
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
I don't think any of us would disagree
Well,
with
no,
the sentiments of this.
You know, and it goes a long way to what I was saying earlier on in the week about people profiteering off of other
Yes.
people's misery.
Yes.
And it's something that, the vast majority of Scottish citizens wouldn't do. And,
Yeah.
you know, unfortunately, it only manifests itself, you know, with people with centre-right values, you know.
It's something that happens in the farming sector, or it used to happen, that during foot and mouth crisis, the
Yeah, they'd
landlords
use it as a-
waived the rent. I mean, you eventually had to pay it, but
Yeah.
but they waived it for that period of time.
Yeah.
Well,
give
at
you
least
that
they
time.
had the good sense to know that their workforce was valued.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I did actually invite Ross Greer to come on to Broadcasting Scotland at any time because we're not a
Well-
party affiliated.
Many times I'm
broadcaster.
told he's been invited to this show.
Yeah. I mean, Maggie Chapman
One day.
used to come on and stuff like that and all the rest of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you're
Well, listen-
listening, Ross, make a phone call.
Okay. Well, listen, that's about all we've got time for tonight. Thank you both for your excellent contributions as ever. It's time now for me to make my usual appeal. For those of you who are not struggling to afford the daily essentials at the moment, if you have enough money put aside and you would like to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, please follow the instructions on your screen now and you can find your way to our page and register as a supporter. That is about all we have time for this week. Hi there, sorry for the break in transmission there. Just enough time to tell you that this is the last edition for this week. I will be back again presenting Scotland at 7 on Monday. In the meantime, from all of us here in the studio, from Chris and from Day, very good night to you all. Have a great weekend.